talking to the property manager of these 12 duplexes that were situated on the corner, because I had just won a bid to paint all of these properties. It was the summer of 1981, June. It was, again, I was drenched in sweat, trying to figure out how in the world am I possibly going to get this job done? Because in addition to the 12 duplexes that I was commissioned to paint, each of the properties had a detached garage, and my charge was to paint exterior, interior, including all the door frames and the jambs. It was going to be a massive project for me, and I was contemplating, how am I going to hire enough people to help me, get through this? Interestingly enough, just a couple weeks before that, I had been elected to serve on the student council of my high school at the end of my sophomore year. And I was told that I was going to have to go to this leadership camp for 4 nights, 5 days. And I'm telling myself this story that this is going to be the worst summer of my life. What in the world did I get myself into? I'm going to have no fun. I was freshly licensed, ready to drive, and was ready to just have this miserable time. Fortunately for me, it turned out a little bit differently than that. Fast forward about 6 weeks, my dad shows up on the property of the duplexes where we were working, and he was looking for me. I don't remember what it was exactly that he wanted to tell me, but he was trying to find me. This was the days before, of course, Find Friends and cell phones and all of these things. So he starts walking around and he's asking all these various people, have you seen Jay? Do you know Jay? And finally, one of the people in the group, my friend Kay, said, oh yeah, Gil, she knew who my dad was. He's out at the lake water skiing with a bunch of people. And she told me later that the look on his face was like she feared for my life as he was walking away from the property. The part of the story that I remember is we were out on the lake water skiing at the local lake, Lake Maloney, and I was with a bunch of friends, girls and guys, hanging out, water skiing, having a great time. And I remember as we're kind of pulling into the bay, getting ready to load the boat, I looked up the hill, and there's my dad's yellow Suburban, my dad leaning on the front of the car, and I started telling my story, oh shit, I'm in big trouble. I didn't know what for exactly, but I knew that something was not going to go down well. And I do remember that it took an inordinate amount of time that day to load the boat as I'm looking up the hill, wondering what conversation I'm going to have. Probably 20, 30 minutes, we get the boat loaded, and I kind of slowly amble on up the hill, fully expecting the onslaught that's about to come from me, but I didn't get the onslaught. What I got instead was the talk. Everybody have the talk with their parents when they were in high school? Well, the talk that I'm talking about is the capitalism talk. It may not be the one that you're thinking about. Here's what the conversation went like. It was okay, well, you bid a project, and you bid enough value into it, and then you go and you hire a bunch of people. And I paid, by the way, my classmates about $2 more an hour than they would have made at Wendy's, McDonald's, whatever other job they were going to do that summer. And I had a huge margin built into the project, so everybody wins. My classmates all made more money than they would have done if they would have got their normal job. The property manager got exactly what they wanted. The tenants of the properties, I had a windfall. This was capitalism at its finest. This is what it was all about. And I learned that lesson precisely 2 weeks before I got in the car and drove to this summer leadership camp where the seeds of servant leadership were planted inside of me. So in the span of less than a month, in the summer of 1981, I learned 2 of the most valuable lessons that I believe a person can learn in modern society, and that is that it's possible for you to do business in a way where everyone wins, and it's also possible to do good in the world. The things I learned at that leadership camp set me on a path for the rest of my life that enabled me to be always focused on how to bring other people up into positions of authority and leadership around me. It is possible to do well and to do good in the world, and thank goodness that happened to me in that fateful summer. Today we're going to be digging into the mindsets, the framework, and the attributes of do more good leaders. I'm going to share with you the results of a profound volume of research that points to really specific outcomes that we as leaders can imbue these concepts into the way that we live our lives. And it's mostly based on these interviews that I've had with Do More Good leaders around North America. And again, if you were here yesterday, I talked a bit about this, but I want to really make sure this is clear that the things that I'm about to share with you are things that came out of actual conversations that happened with these leaders of all of these companies that have been recognized in some publication, whether it's Harvard Business Review or Forbes or Inc. or whatever. There's all these publications that do these best places to work lists. And in talking to the leaders of those companies, this is what we have learned. We learned that it's not only about culture that allows these businesses to thrive in the best possible way. It's also about the fact that they're focused on a cause and that they serve the broader communities that are part of that organization. These three things are the pillars of the Do More Good movement. And there's an aspect that we refer to as Main Street capitalism that came out of this whole process. At the top of the list is the purpose of the organization, and at the bottom is the process. So the purpose is the why, and the process is the how. And purpose without process is hallucination. So it's important that both of these things are working closely together, and it all starts with the people, as it always does. These are the employees, the contractors, the vendors, all the people that are part of this ecosystem. And the people serve the company, and then the company serves the public good. So the community, the impact we have on the community, the fact that the community is focused on abundance and the rising tide lifting all boats. And what happens is the public then supports the company and elevates its ability to generate profit on behalf of the company. And then, of course, the profit empowers the people, and this endless circle continues. Now, in the delta between profit and people is where culture lives. This is where one of those foundational pillars lives. And then in the delta of people and public is the community aspect, and then the cause happens as a result of the public's ability to support and make and build profit in the organization. This is the way Do More Good works. This is Main Street capitalism. And at the top of this list, again, we have really important understanding that this is the aspiration that we strive to achieve. And down at the bottom, these are the actions that we undertake in order to achieve that. This is the model of what we refer to as Main Street capitalism that came out of the research we've been working on. Now, again, culture, cause, community as the pillars are really important in terms of just building a foundational underlying of the entire movement. What I'm going to share with you now is on the path to purpose that every single business in the world is undertaking. We're all somewhere on this path. Some, like, again, Patagonia, have achieved at the highest levels. Others are somewhere at the beginning stages, but we're all somewhere on this path. And the research, as I went back and listened to many of the interviews and the reviews that we had with folks, there were a couple of things that really stand out to me now in retrospect as I look back on this a couple of years later. We heard a lot about all of the different frameworks that some of these companies, not all, but some of them are tied to a framework, like 1% for the planet, or certified B Corp, or a benefit corporation, or conscious capitalism. But the one thing that was referenced more than anything else during the interviews was a book and a TED Talk by a gentleman named Simon Sinek. Anybody seen Simon's TED Talk? It's one of the most viewed TED Talks that has ever been made. He talks about the golden circle and how everything starts. It's all about the why, is what Simon says. Well, for the most part, I disagree with Simon. It's not all about the why. It's partially about the why. We know that about 25% of it is the why. But what we often forget about when we're so focused on the why is that the what, the how, and the who are so important. This is why the Do More Good movement exists. We exist to help educate and empower business leaders to understand, especially the what, the who, the how, that aspect of it, so that people understand how to get from here to any other point on the iteration of the evolvement of their organization. Again, we hear this phrase all the time, purpose over profit. At the Do More Good movement, we believe that the proper way to state that is profit because of purpose. We know that companies that have a clearly defined purpose and follow that purpose in their organization are 14 times more profitable than those companies that are not. So it's important that we're focused on the right things. Now, in the research, there were three mindsets that generally emerged in these categories that we learned are foundational in understanding how these companies operate. I'm going to share these three mindsets with you and give you some thoughts about how we can be capable and able leaders as we lead into the mindsets, number one, of servant leadership. Servant leadership is all about making sure that we as leaders serve our team. If you've ever heard someone say, my people do this or my team does that, as a leader, the proper way to approach it, and we see this across all of the Do More Good companies that we interviewed, the team doesn't serve you as a leader or manager or supervisor. You serve your team. Your purpose is to remove obstacles for them and to help them become the best at what they're doing, to help them, to give them valuable insight and feedback in terms of constructive criticism, if you want to call it that, because that's a gift we give to one another, the ability to help empower the people around us. It's really important to understand that this is how we keep the people that we already have. You know, everyone else is saying, you got to hire great people. You got to hire great people, and I agree with that. But at Do More Good, we say it's even more important to keep the great people that you already have. And you do that by building this mindset of servant leadership across an organization. There are story after story after story of companies and their leaders who are leading by servant leadership and rescuing companies that were, really sliding into the dumpster before someone steps up and leads them. One of my favorite things is this process that I learned from my daughter. This is my daughter, Ellen, in the center here. She attended this launch workshop, the leadership camp, about 20 years after I went there. Of course, I had all three of my children go through this summer workshop because it was such an important pivot point in my life. Ellen went to leadership camp. She came back the next year. She ran for student council. She got elected, and she was on fire. She was so excited that she got to serve in a student government and learn these concepts that she'd learned at this summer workshop, and she was ready to put them into play. And first day of student council, she came home, and I could tell that she was deeply affected by something, and she had this look in her eyes like, Dad, this is stupid. I mean, it's a party planning committee. The advisors are essentially telling us that we don't have really any authority, or they're not looking for ideas. They're not asking us for anything. They just want us to follow their orders and help plan things. And she worked her best during that entire year to try to bring ideas and challenges to the table to get the leader of the faculty advisor of the student council to change their way. So finally, she got the courage to reach out to the principal of the school. She set an appointment. She worked on this for weeks, and she practiced on me several times to go in and do this presentation to the principal of the high school. And she went in there. She did a 30-minute presentation extolling the virtues of how to help students learn how to be leaders in their schools by giving them the opportunity to lead and actually do something rather than just be a party planning committee. But like most principals in most high schools, he had much bigger fish to fry. He politely thanked her and sent her on her way and said, sorry, there's not much I can do. Instead of being broken by that, she made a decision. She went to a couple friends, and they founded a new organization. She did not go run for student council the next year. Instead, she founded an organization called the Service Learning Club. At her high school, to this day, like 16 years later, a long time later now, this organization has led more than 1,000 high school students to learn firsthand what it means to volunteer for organizations. This is an organization that connects them with opportunities to go into the community and volunteer. She made a profound difference because she stood firm in her conviction, her belief. As a servant leader, she knew that she had to stand up for something. And I'm so proud that I learned this lesson from my own daughter. One caution that I have around servant leadership is this mindset of servant leadership means that you have to be okay with the fact that the world does not actually revolve around you. Something I know a lot of us, when we're toddlers and even sometimes teenagers, it's hard to overcome this lesson. The second mindset that I want to share with you this morning is the mindset of abundance. Now, abundance is about this concept that a rising tide lifts all boats. This mindset that is in complete opposition to the mindset of scarcity. Anybody here know who Stephen Covey is? Dr. Covey, I believe, is the most important, the most influential, I guess you would call him self-help person in my lifetime. I had the good fortune when he was still living to attend some of his workshops in the 80s and 90s, and he was a brilliant teacher, and his concepts around the 7 habits of highly effective leaders, I think, are foundational in the mindset of learning how to be a good steward of the world and a good person. And it was Dr. Covey who coined the term scarcity mindset, and he contrasts it with the abundance mindset like this. In the scarcity mindset, we think small. Abundant mindset, we think big. Resentment turns into happiness. Fear of change becomes the willingness and the opportunity to embrace change. You go from reactive to being proactive, and then what doesn't work becomes what does work. We're focused on the right things when we are focused on abundance. A leader with an abundance mindset is more concerned about what she believes in than necessarily what she stands against. I think it's important to really think about what this means for a moment. Of course, it's perfectly appropriate and it's necessary in many cases to stand against things. We all should be standing against things that are wrong or immoral, et cetera, et cetera. But there's so much more passion and power and there's so much more followability when others are interested in getting behind someone when they stand for something. And that's what the abundance mentality is. It's about leaning into where we could go, what we could become, elevating ourselves and all of those around us. A mindset of abundance may lead to a brain that is constantly deluged with a rhapsody of curiosity and positivity. This mindset that the world is actually going to figure things out. I shared this yesterday that I'm one of those people that believe that all the things happening in the world around us today with AI and machine learning and et cetera, and there are so many fatalist opinions out there that we're going to end up obliterating ourselves from the planet. I don't think we're going to last. We're going to destroy the world and the economy and the environment. I'm one of those people that believes that we're going to figure this out. I'm one of those people that believe that as humans, we are going to continue to elevate our ability, our consciousness, the way we care about each other, our planet and the world, and we're going to figure this out. And the abundance mindset is rooted in this mindset of belief that we are going to figure it out. The third mindset, and we see this across all the companies that we worked with and that we interviewed, and this is the one that came up more than anything else. The mindset of growth, and this means so many different things. At the beginning, it means that we're always focused on how to iterate, evolve, and get better. This is about the concept of R&D. Everybody know what R&D stands for? Rip off and duplicate, right? Yeah. It's about this mindset that somebody else has already figured this out. There is no good reason why we have to go back to ground zero and start over to figure out and reinvent things over and over and over again. There is so much information and so much history that we can learn from and we can grow. And finding a better way is about this never-ending mindset that we're not going to do something this way just because that's the way it's always been done before. At our company, Firespring, we have signs all over our building. This is the mantra that we deploy. We deploy it in every way possible. It's not just about finding a better way to improve an internal process. If a client comes to us and says, hey, I want to print this and this size, we might say, well, if you change it by like just a 1/4 inch, we can print it like 8 up on a page and we can get a bigger yield and it costs you less money, et cetera, et cetera. We're always trying to find a better way. It's about helping all of those around us see and learn from the things that we've done in the past. And Eric Hoffer, who's a prominent moral and social philosopher from the first part of the 20th century, and his work is amazing. He's the one that said, the future belongs to the learners, not the knowers. This sentiment is deeply embodied into the characteristics of a do more good leader. This mindset that we are leaning in to know and to learn and constantly focused on what can we learn from this person, from this interaction, from this conference. What can we learn from it, as opposed to being in the mindset? We've all been around people who we know as a knower, right? We've sat at lunch, we've hung out with people, and they're on this constant effort to try and impress you with how much information they've retained and how much they know. And think about the people in your life, the people that fill you up with energy, that give you this life force. It's most likely the people who show interest in you, who lean in with a learner's mindset because they want to know more about how you do this, how you do that. It's the learners in the world that are setting the path for do more good leaders. Be known as someone who's a learner. There's a lot of stuff online written about how to be interesting, how to be the most interesting person in the room. Our goal should not be to be the most interesting person in the room. Our goal should be the most interested person in the room. If you walk into any room with the mindset of being the most interested, watch what happens to the dynamic of the conversation and the interactions you might have. And Leon Megason, this actually was not Charles Darwin who said this quotation. It's often attributed to him, but it's based on the learnings and the teachings of Charles Darwin. But he said, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." In a growth mindset, everything is about understanding that we need to be focused on how do we get from here to there? How do we change? And we change by understanding that conscious leadership is an inside job. We heard from Rand Stagen, one of the founding advisors of the Do More Good movement yesterday. He's also a co-founder of the Conscious Capitalism movement. And Rand says often, when we have an opportunity to connect and chat, we have this conversation all the time. We're always talking about the evolution of ourselves and how we can become continually, again, the best version of who we are possible to be. We're all just stumbling through life, trying to find the best possible outcomes, wanting to be loved, wanting to be cared for. Conscious leadership is all about leading in a way that I'm the only one. I'm the only one in this room that's capable of changing anything about me. Everyone here can say things and try things, but I'm the only one that can change me, as all of us are the only ones that can change ourselves. We must start here. If we think we're going to change the world by convincing or changing other people, we're just setting ourselves up for failure. And again, there's so much happening. So think about this for a moment. You go back to the beginning of your lifetime and think about everything since the day you were born, everything that's been invented, conceived, created, everything from the beginning of your lifetime all the way to today. And what's going to happen, and I'm going to amend this. Let's go back to the beginning of your parents' lifetime. Well, let's go back to the beginning of the world. Okay, so humans become a thing. Go all the way to today. What's going to happen in the next 18 months, the rate of innovation and change, what's going to happen in the next 18 months will double in output, throughput, capacity because of what's happening right now in the world around us. It is massive what's happening, and I don't think we often stop and get our heads wrapped around the change that we're experiencing. Now, we have two choices. If you've ever been to the ocean and you're trying to jump through a wave and fight your way through that ocean current, as opposed to maybe riding the wave, jumping up on a board and riding along and just kind of finding your groove and letting the power of that wave propel you forward, we can choose to allow the rate of innovation and change to ride it and to create a future for ourselves, or we can choose to fight against it. And in the growth mentality, what we hear over and over from the leaders that are leading companies, that are leading the way, is they are focused on using this mentality of growth as a way to become an elevated version of their own company. A mindset of growth means that you may have to admit that you were wrong. And it also means that you may even have to go back and be okay with being a beginner. These two things are really hard for me. My wife will tell you this: if there's a new game or we're going to go do something that we haven't done before, if Jay is not good at it, he's probably not going to play. That was the old me. I'm becoming much, much better at this as time goes on. I'm starting to evolve a little bit in my willingness to be a beginner again, because for so long I was so tied up, and I'm not good at that. I can't do it. And a mindset of growth means that you have to be okay with that. And it means that you have to lean in to being wrong from time to time. So when I was growing up in my hometown of North Platte, sports was everything to me. When we were in grade school, my older brother, Mark, and our last name is Wilkinson, and somehow our grade school football coach gave him the nickname of Whittle. I'm not sure how I got from Wilkinson to Whittle. So I became Middle Whittle, and my younger brother was Little Whittle. And the Whittle brothers were a self-appointed sports dynasty. Our aspirations, I will share, were much greater than our actual abilities. But sports was everything to us. So it's no surprise that when I had my first son, my first child, Cohagen, I was so ready to live vicariously through him as he excelled in sports. And I was going to follow him down this path and go to every one of his games. And we started all kinds of different activities to try to learn which sport was going to be the thing that he was going to be best at. Well, in the middle of signing him up for everything, I did this one thing where I was his basketball coach, where I sent out this letter and got in touch with all the parents about how we're going to have fun. We're going to be focused on fundamentals, focus, teamwork, sport. This was a 5-game season. And I had this stuff all laid out. And the season actually only lasted 4 games because my son was not really interested in basketball. It wasn't his thing. His thing was music and performance. And slowly it started to emerge, and I started to learn things that I didn't know about. When I was growing up, the thought of going to a musical performance or show choir or swing choir was so far away from the mindset of anything that I thought I knew or that I would ever enjoy. I didn't really understand it. And I kept wondering all along the time when he was going to figure this out. And then he went in high school, his sophomore year in high school, he got the role as Beast in Beauty and the Beast. At the high school that he went to, it was a school that was known for its theater arts performances. It was unheard of that a sophomore would get a leading role in a musical. And it was blowing my mind, and I still couldn't figure it out. I was still wondering all along the way when he was going to figure this out. And the expectation versus my reality started to set in. Instead of bleachers, I was in the theater. Instead of ankle sprains, there were vocal strains. Instead of uniforms, there were costumes. Instead of being a volunteer coach, I became an usher. And instead of fast hands, I learned all about jazz hands. Still, all along the way, I'm trying to figure out when is he going to finally figure out that he's born into an athletic family. Until the day finally came, his senior year in high school, and I sat there in the auditorium, and I still vividly remember being in that audience today, and I came to the realization as I'm sitting there watching my son get inducted into the Performing Arts Hall of Fame, that it was me that was ripe for change. It wasn't him that needed the change, it was me. It was this process of really understanding that there is a different way. And I will tell you that I was not inducted into the Athletic Hall of Fame in my high school. I'm really proud that I learned this lesson from my son. And I've learned lessons we all learn lessons from the children in our lives. So those are the mindsets of Do More Good companies. Now I'm going to share with you the 5 formative attributes of Do More Good leaders. These are the attributes that we need to, again, imbue into our DNA as leaders in the organizations that we serve. These are the attributes that make it possible for us to do the work of a Do More Good leader. And the first of the 5 is the attribute of kindness. I'm a huge believer in this mindset of kindness. Our dear friend Tony Goins, who opened the conference yesterday, he's the one who said kindness matters. The Dalai Lama, be kind whenever possible. It is always possible. When I was at that leadership camp, this is the sign again that hung on the wall of the classroom that I was in my cohort of 12 students. I expect to pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness I can show, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. And understanding this aspect of kindness is really critical. And kind, I want to be really clear about something. Kind is different than nice. You know, we hear the Nebraska nice thing from time to time, and I just want to be really clear about understanding the difference between kind and nice. When you're nice, it can be enabling. Oftentimes, when you're kind to somebody, it can be empowering. It takes it to another level. When you're nice, sometimes you might lie to keep the peace. I needed to be nice about it, right? Kind, the truth shall set you free. The ability to lean into honest conversations in a way that builds people up in a constructive way is a powerful thing. Nice expects something in return. Kind expects nothing in return. Nice focuses on being liked, whereas kindness focuses on being helpful, which is a much more important attribute. And then, of course, the core sentiment of nice is fear. Most niceness is motivated by the fear not being nice or being perceived in a way that's not. Whereas kind operates on the core sentiment of love. And everything in the world, is either motivated by fear or love in some capacity. So kindness, this is my favorite definition of what kindness is. Kindness is loaning someone your strength instead of reminding them of their weakness. This is a power that we all hold inside of us, this power to be kind. The second attribute is the attribute of empathy. Empathy is all over business publications today. Gary Vaynerchuk talks about it. He says it's the core tenet as to why he's good at building culture in his companies, but he couldn't do that without being self-aware. So one important aspect of this concept of empathy is that empathy is a direct first cousin to self-awareness. And self-awareness, unfortunately, while it's something that can be improved upon, it's not something that comes naturally to everyone, right? This ability to really, truly understand how we are coming across to someone and really be ever mindful and so acutely aware of the things that are going on around us. It's a superpower that some people have, and it's hard to develop it. It's something that takes a lot of work. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, who's really turned this company, not really turned it around because it was doing fine, but he's elevated in a way that no one thought was possible when he took the seat of leadership in this organization. And he says the source of all innovation is empathy. Oprah says that leadership is about empathy, about relating to and connecting with people for the purpose of inspiring and empowering their lives. Here's what we know. We know that empathy changes perspective completely. The discouraged, because of empathy, become encouraged. The disrespected feel respected. The disconnected feel connected. The excluded feel included. And the invisible feel seen. This is the power of empathy. And who doesn't want all of these things? Encouragement, respect, connection, inclusion, being seen. Who doesn't want that in the organizations that they're part of? This is what every human wants to be part of an organization. The third attribute is the attribute of gratitude. There's so much research behind gratitude. I've read these things where they took a control group, they took like 100 people, and they sent 50 of them out and gave them a charge to go express gratitude 10 times today. So when they drive through, get their cup of coffee in the morning, they have to express gratitude. When everything they do throughout the day, express gratitude. The other group, they didn't give them any instruction other than, we'll tell you in 3 days what your actions are. And then they brought them all back together. The group that expressed gratitude 10 times a day over the course of a couple of days, when they brought both groups back together, had improved health. Their blood pressure had dropped. Their confidence, their mood, their vitality, everything changed about them. Just simply by this concept of expressing gratitude. Instead of honking on your horn, flipping someone off because they're trying to merge in traffic in front of you, why not just ease off on the gas and motion them in and just for a moment, just let that like soak over how it makes you feel to have done something kind just for that moment. The power of gratitude is profound. And it's not just in terms of how it affects us personally, it's a business impact as well. There are so many resources and books and articles about gratitude from the perspective of business. Gratitude turns what we have into enough. It stops us from constantly yearning for more. It turns whatever it is that we have into, well, this is enough. Cicero says that gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but it's the parent of all the others. And we know that there's a lot of science behind this. Again, the two regions of our brain that are affected when gratitude sets deep inside of us. One is the hypothalamus, which regulates stress in our brain, and then the ventral tegmental area, which is essentially the part that gives us pleasure. So to relieve stress and give us pleasure simply by expressing gratitude, again, who doesn't want this? It's something that is in critical lack of supply these days, and it's something we need to be focused more on. The fourth attribute is vulnerability. Now, vulnerability is about being honest with people about who you are not, and who you want to be. This is the part of my life that of all of these things, I've probably struggled the most with up until maybe the last 5 years of my life. Being open enough to be willing to be frank and be willing to address the fear that I have of letting people see my weakness is the thing that I had to get over in order to start really understanding how to become who I'm interested in becoming as a human being. The mindset and the fundamental attribute of understanding vulnerability is largely said, the queen of vulnerability is Brené Brown. She has her own Netflix special where she talks about vulnerability for half of the special. And Brené says that vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage, and they aren't always comfortable, those two things, but they are never, never weakness. She also says that vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation. So she and Satya Nadella are going to fight it out because he said it was empathy, she says it's vulnerability. Let's just say that they are the twin powers of the attributes that we must be focused on. One of the things that I've been learning a lot about, and my wife and I have had lots of conversations around, is this mindset or the concept of intent versus impact. So here's what we know. We know what's in our hearts, right? And so we know what our intentions are. We know if we say something or do something, we didn't intend to hurt your feelings or to cause damage or whatever. So we know what's in our heart, but we don't know what's in the hearts of others. There's no way for us to see or know what's in the heart of another. So we judge other people based on the impact of their words or their actions, and we judge ourselves based on our intent. That is unfair, but that's how we all naturally operate in the day-to-day world. And recognizing this and being aware of intent versus impact allows us to change the way that we interact with other people, always respecting and tending to whatever our actions or words. If it caused a challenge, a rift, it caused a reaction in someone else, a loved one, a child, a spouse, a coworker, the first thing we should do is honor the impact of whatever our words, our intention, whatever we created. Honor the impact of that first before we say, that wasn't my intent. I didn't mean to do that. Lighten up. I didn't mean that at all. That's not the best way to respond to something when you've caused hurt or harm in someone. Intent versus impact. And going back to the Leon Megason quote, I'm going to say, rephrasing this, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one who is most real. Authenticity is the word that we hear over and over and over, and that is imbued into the concept of this attribute. And our fifth and final attribute is the attribute of love. Becca yesterday, if you were here for yesterday's session, talked a lot about love. Love as an attribute of business. Again, there are so many books and there's so much material out in the world about how love as an attribute of business is such an important construct. I am in love with the concept of love as it applies to business. And when we talk to all of these leaders that are leading these companies across the world, that are the best companies to work for, that are recognized as being amazing organizations, the number one thing that we heard, when you go back and you pour through all the content, the word that comes out, other than the, a, and those kind of words, is love. It's shocking how many times people would say love in the context of business. So there was this study done at Harvard more than 80 years ago. It took years and years, and what they were doing is they were trying to understand what is happiness and how can we gain or achieve happiness in our life. George Valiant at Harvard Medical School, at the conclusion of this 75-plus year study, $20 million they expended on the grant study to really understand what is happiness. And there was a 5-word conclusion that they came out with, and it was kind of funny. It was a mic drop thing. He did 5 words, dropped the mic, and then he came back and gave more context. But all these years, decades of research, and here's the conclusion. Happiness is love. Full stop. Happiness is love, full stop. And if we want to work in environments where people are happy, if that's an important thing for us, then we need to imbue love into the workplace. Work is love made visible. My favorite poet, Khalil Gibran, had a lot of things to say about love and work. Team members who feel marginalized at their place of work, where they don't feel love, they will never fall in love with their company. It's just not going to happen. And We know that if you build a workplace where people feel important, included, and loved, they will perform better. They will allow the business to achieve at the highest levels possible. Now, there are two types of love, and I want to be really clear about this. There is passionate love, and then there's companionate love. Separate definitions. Passionate love has an emotional connection. It means you're like fixed. You're always thinking about this person. It sounds a little talkerish. There's a physical attraction. That's not the kind of love we're talking about at work, right? We're talking about companionate love, where there's commitment, intimacy, and trust. Who doesn't want the people that work around them? Who doesn't want to feel committed, to feel intimate in a cerebral way, and have trust with the people that they work with? We know that the people that are part of, that understand and buy into companionate love are better performers at work and happier in their jobs. Now, Diana Rabb, who's a friend of mine, I spoke at a conference with her several years ago, wrote an article on the 7 ways to express your love. And I think this is interesting because this article was written from the perspective of passionate love, from how to love the spouse or your children. She says, listen, say please and thank you, share what you appreciate about them, offer to help, send them a handwritten letter, practice the art of forgiveness. All 6 of those are noble intentions in a way to express love. Her 7th one is the one I wouldn't recommend. I wouldn't recommend writing a coworker a love note. But the other 6 are powerful, powerful ways to connect with the people in your work environment. So these are the attributes: kindness, empathy, gratitude, vulnerability, and love. And when we combine those with the mindsets that we shared with you, the mindsets of servant leadership, the mindset of abundance, and the mindset of growth, we have an opportunity to radically change how the organizations that we work with and for, how we change that organization and build an environment and a culture that will create do more good leaders and do more good companies that are so important in this world. And this is what we're focused on at the Do More Good movement. We are focused on helping to educate, empower, and inspire leaders like yourself and the companies that are part of the fabric of the Do More Good movement to elevate in such a way that we are constantly finding the better way to do things. And I just want to say, as we're wrapping up, as I'm finishing today and we move on to the rest of the content today, thank you so much for being here, for being part of this important movement, for the work that you will do and will continue to do around elevating these conversations in your places of work, and start thinking about how to make all of these things live and come to life in the way that you behave and the way that you interact with people in your organizations. Trust me on this, a year from now, if you don't think about this, you're going to wish you would have started today. Thank you so much for your time.